Rebecca Lamb has finally had enough and is speaking out against Joanie Lamb over the controversial situation with Doug Weiss. In an emotional and fiery statement, she reveals what has been brewing behind the scenes for far too long. What has been hidden from the public is now coming to light, and Rebecca is not holding back. This explosive confrontation has everyone talking. Find out what Rebecca had to say and how it could change everything. Rebecca Lamb Weiss, the youngest daughter of Joanie Lamb, has never been afraid to speak her mind, especially when it came to her mother's decisions. From the very beginning, Rebecca was outspoken about her concerns regarding Joni's relationship with Dr. Doug Weiss. Unlike many people who may keep their opinions to themselves, Rebecca made it clear that she wasn't comfortable with the direction her mother was going. She didn't try to hide her feelings or hold back her concerns. She wasn't just quietly observing. She actively raised alarms about the relationship and its potential impact on the family. Rebecca's concerns weren't just about the relationship itself. She was deeply worried about how it would affect their family dynamics, their ministry, and, more importantly, the values their family had always preached. As a public figure and someone who had spent much of her life in the spotlight, Joni's personal choices were no longer just her own. They had the potential to influence how others viewed the family and their ministry. For Rebecca, this wasn't just a personal issue. It was a matter of protecting the family's integrity and the legacy they had worked so hard to build. In the early stages of Joni's relationship with Doug, Rebecca didn't shy away from voicing her concerns. She was open with her mother, telling her exactly how she felt. She didn't sugarcoat things or try to hide the fact that she thought the relationship was moving too fast. It wasn't just about disliking Doug as a person. Rebecca felt like something wasn't right about the situation and didn't think it was the best decision for Joni. Her willingness to speak up, though, created tension between her and Joni. While some might have kept quiet to avoid conflict, Rebecca didn't back down. She was trying to make her mom see what she believed to be the bigger picture. But the more Rebecca spoke up, the more it seemed like her voice was being ignored. Joni was focused on moving forward with her relationship, and her daughter's concerns were not just brushed aside. They were starting to strain their relationship. Rebecca's boldness and openness were met with resistance, and instead of a productive conversation, it often turned into arguments. It wasn't just about a disagreement over Doug. It was about the deeper issues of trust, communication, and family dynamics. As the relationship progressed, Rebecca found herself more and more isolated in her views. Her mother's relationship with Doug became a growing point of contention, and the family tension continued to build. It wasn't just about one woman's decision. It was about how those decisions were affecting the entire family. Rebecca's desire to protect the family's values and legacy made her push harder. But in doing so, it created an emotional divide. What started as a mother-daughter conversation turned into a painful fracture that neither seemed able to mend. Rebecca's outspoken concerns were, for her, an attempt to hold on to the values that had defined their family for so long. But it also led to a growing sense of alienation. The tension between them wasn't just about Doug. It was about what Rebecca felt was at stake: the integrity of their family and their ministry. Joanie Lamb's reaction to her daughter Rebecca's concerns about her relationship with Dr. Doug Weiss was nothing short of intense and emotional. What began as a simple mother-daughter conversation escalated into a private confrontation that revealed deep fractures within their relationship. While Rebecca was outspoken and unafraid to express her feelings about the direction Joni was taking, Joni's response was far from receptive. Instead of listening to her daughter's concerns, Joni seemed to shut down, dismissing Rebecca's feelings as if they were mere misunderstandings. The private confrontation that took place in May 2023, just weeks before Joni and Doug's wedding, marked a turning point in their relationship. It wasn't just an argument, it was a clash of values, perspectives, and emotions. Rebecca, as the youngest of Joni's children, had always looked up to her mother. Joni was a strong figure in the family, a public leader who represented faith, love, and commitment in the eyes of their supporters. To Rebecca, however, this commitment to family and ministry was now being questioned. She felt like her mother was rushing into a relationship with Doug, a man who had been part of their ministry, but whose presence, in Rebecca's eyes, was complicating things. Her biggest concern wasn't just the speed of the relationship, it was the message that it sent to the world, especially considering their prominent roles as Christian leaders. Rebecca's discomfort with the relationship was clear. She could see the emotional distance between her mother and her late husband Marcus, and she believed that Doug was filling a void too quickly. Joni had lost Marcus, but Rebecca felt that her mother was trying to replace him too soon, not giving herself the time or space to grieve properly. Rebecca knew her mother had been through a lot, but she also felt that rushing into a new relationship without dealing with the emotions tied to Marcus's death was a dangerous move. More than that, it felt like a betrayal to the values they had always preached. They had built their family, their ministry, and their lives around faithfulness, commitment, and healing. For Rebecca, seeing her mother rush into a marriage with someone else seemed like a contradiction to everything they had stood for. When the confrontation took place, it was clear that Rebecca wasn't holding back. She didn't simply express her concerns in a calm and measured way. The emotions were raw, and the pain she felt from seeing her mother move forward so quickly was palpable. She wasn't just upset, she was deeply hurt. The conversation quickly turned into a heated argument, with Rebecca accusing Joni of not listening, of making decisions without considering the impact they would have on the family. The tension between them was thick, and it wasn't just about Doug. It was about trust, about the bond they had shared, and about the future of the Lamb family legacy. Joni, on the other hand, reacted defensively. She didn't seem to take Rebecca's concerns seriously. Instead, she accused Rebecca of being overly emotional and unwilling to see things from her perspective. Joni's reaction, from Rebecca's point of view, wasn't just dismissive. It felt like an attack on her integrity. Joni was not acknowledging the hurt that Rebecca felt or the concerns she was trying to express. Instead, it felt like Joni was shutting her down, trying to push her away instead of hearing her out. The emotional weight of the confrontation only grew when Joni shared her version of the argument in public. She claimed that Rebecca had been disrespectful, accusing her of being selfish and self-absorbed. Joni painted Rebecca's concerns as mere complaints, not as legitimate fears for the future of their family and their ministry. This made the entire situation even more complicated, as Rebecca felt that her voice had not only been ignored, but also distorted. Joni's reaction to the confrontation was also deeply tied to her own feelings of guilt and insecurity. It's clear that the situation wasn't just about the relationship with Doug. It was about how Joni was dealing with the aftermath of Marcus's death and the weight of leading a ministry while grappling with personal loss. Her response to Rebecca was likely influenced by her own internal struggle. On some level, Joni may have felt like she was losing control of her life, her family, and her ministry. Instead of opening up to her daughter, she turned inward, retreating into a defensive posture. The argument between them wasn't just about Doug. It was about how Joni was coping with her grief, her decisions, and the emotional turmoil that came with it. And because Joni wasn't able to share those feelings openly, it created an emotional chasm between her and Rebecca. The confrontation was also significant because it marked a moment of powerlessness for Rebecca. She had always been a strong and vocal member of the family, someone who wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo when she felt it was necessary. But in this moment, she was up against something bigger than just her mother's relationship. She was up against a public image, a carefully curated story that Joni had built around her new relationship with Doug. To Rebecca, it wasn't just about her mother's choice to marry Doug. It was about the broader implications of that choice. Joni's marriage to Doug was not just a personal decision, it was a public one. As leaders in the Christian community, their actions were being watched, scrutinized, and, in many cases, judged. And Rebecca didn't want her family to lose the credibility and trust they had built over the years. The argument ended with Rebecca feeling isolated and unheard, and Joni feeling attacked and misunderstood. Despite the intense emotions, there was no resolution. The conversation didn't lead to any understanding or compromise. Instead, it deepened the divide between mother and daughter. What started as a concern about family values and integrity quickly turned into a power struggle, with both parties standing firm in their beliefs but unwilling to meet halfway. For Rebecca, the confrontation wasn't just about Doug. It was about her family's future, about the legacy her father had built, and about holding on to the faith that had always been the foundation of their lives. For Joni, the confrontation was about her own sense of control and the difficult decisions she had to make in the wake of Marcus's death. This private confrontation between Joni and Rebecca marked a turning point in their relationship, one that many in the family and the ministry community have been watching closely. The fallout from this argument wasn't just personal. It had implications for the future of Dayar and the direction Joni was taking the ministry. It also raised questions about leadership, accountability, and the role of family in ministry. For Rebecca, it was a painful moment of trying to protect her family's integrity, but it also showed how far apart they had become in terms of values and beliefs. Joni's reaction, meanwhile, revealed the emotional and spiritual burden she was carrying and the challenges she faced in moving forward with her life after Marcus's death. The aftermath of this confrontation would leave lasting scars, not just on their relationship, but on the ministry they had both worked so hard to build. The public controversy surrounding Joanie Lamb and her relationship with Dr. Doug Weiss has been one of the most talked about issues in recent times, especially within the Christian community. When Joni, the co-founder of Dayar Television Network, made the decision to marry Doug Weiss, the news spread quickly, but it wasn't without its share of controversy. To many, it felt like the latest chapter in a long and complicated story, filled with questions, doubts, and growing concerns about what was really happening behind the scenes. The controversy began long before Joni and Doug's wedding announcement. The relationship between Joni and Doug was one that raised eyebrows almost immediately. Doug was well known in Christian circles as a marriage counselor, speaker, and author, someone who had built a reputation for helping couples heal broken relationships. He had spent years advising others on how to build strong, healthy marriages. So when his own marriage to Lisa Weiss, Joni's close friend, fell apart, many were taken aback. It was hard to reconcile the man who had helped countless couples with his own marriage's demise, especially given the circumstances surrounding the end of his relationship with Lisa. The public was already on edge when Doug and Lisa's divorce was made public, but what followed was even more shocking. Just months after his divorce from Lisa, Doug married Joni. The speed of this new marriage was what caught everyone off guard. It felt too quick, too soon, especially for someone who had spent years preaching about the importance of faithfulness, commitment, and patience. The timing of Doug and Joni's relationship seemed almost insensitive, considering Joni had only recently lost her husband, Marcus Lamb, who had passed away just months before she announced her relationship with Doug. The issue wasn't just about the speed of the relationship. For many, it was about the optics, the way it looked. Joni was a well-respected public figure in the Christian community, and her relationship with Doug was anything but private. Dayar, the network she co-founded with her late husband Marcus, had been a platform for teaching, healing, and faith. It had reached millions of homes, offering a vision of Christian living and marital faithfulness. To many viewers, seeing Joni move on so quickly after Marcus's death felt like a betrayal of the values she had once promoted. It was difficult for many to watch a beloved public figure seemingly abandon the principles of faith and commitment for a whirlwind romance that, to some, appeared to be happening too fast. This wasn't just about the Lamb family's personal choices. It was about their role as spiritual leaders. When leaders of a ministry or a church make personal decisions that seem to go against the very values they preach, it can cause confusion and disappointment among their followers. Joni's decision to marry Doug raised difficult questions about integrity, leadership, and what it means to live according to the teachings of the Bible. For some, this was a case of a leader failing to live up to the standards they set for others. To make matters even more complicated, Joni and Doug's relationship wasn't just about two people coming together. It was about a ministry that was built on the foundation of family, faith, and community. Joni was supposed to be the spiritual leader of Dayar, a ministry that had once been a beacon of hope and inspiration to millions. But now, as the public watched her move forward with Doug, many began to question whether the values of Dayar were being compromised. It wasn't just about a personal relationship, it was about the message that was being sent to the audience. If the leaders of the ministry couldn't maintain the same standards they preached, how could they expect their viewers to do so? Joni's relationship with Doug also raised concerns about boundaries and transparency. The fact that Doug had been spending weekends at Joni's house before they were married created even more questions. For many, it felt inappropriate for a Christian leader to be living with an unmarried man while mourning the loss of her husband. From a biblical perspective, this raised serious issues about purity, respect for marriage, and living in a way that honors God. Even if Doug and Joni's relationship was platonic at first, the appearance of impropriety was hard to ignore. The Bible teaches believers to avoid even the appearance of evil, 1 Thessalonians 5:22, and to many, the sight of an unmarried man spending weekends in the home of a grieving widow sent the wrong message. The public's reaction to Joni and Doug's relationship wasn't just about their personal choices. It was also about the integrity of DR as a ministry. People began questioning the authenticity of the teachings and values the network had always promoted. If Joni, as the public face of DR, could make such a swift transition from mourning her late husband to marrying someone else, what did that say about the message they were broadcasting to the world? For many, it seemed like a double standard: preach faithfulness and commitment to the audience, but then quickly move on when it suited personal desires. But despite the criticism, Joni and Doug continued to move forward with their relationship, insisting that their love was genuine and that God had brought them together. Joni spoke publicly about how they found comfort and support in each other during their grief, sharing how their relationship had grown from prayer, faith, and mutual understanding. She framed their marriage as a divine plan, a love story that was meant to be. While some believed her, others were skeptical, feeling that the timing and the way things had unfolded didn't align with what they had come to expect from Christian leaders. One of the most concerning aspects of this situation was how Joni seemed to isolate herself from the very people who might have offered her the most support. Family members, especially her children, were uncomfortable with the speed at which the relationship progressed. Rebecca Lamb, Joni's daughter, had been one of the most vocal critics of the relationship. Rebecca's concerns were not just about the marriage itself, but about the lack of transparency and accountability surrounding Joni's decisions. When she expressed her concerns, she was met with resistance, and the tension between mother and daughter grew. The public rift between them only added to the complexity of the situation. In the midst of all this, the integrity of DR was called into question. The network, which had once been a trusted source of spiritual guidance, now seemed tainted by personal drama. Many began to wonder if DR's leadership had become more about image management than spiritual growth. Was the ministry being led by people who were willing to do whatever it took to protect their brand, even if it meant sacrificing personal integrity? The public controversies surrounding Joni and Doug's relationship raised significant concerns about the future of the network and its ability to continue its mission with authenticity and credibility. The entire situation felt like a cautionary tale about the dangers of mixing personal life with public ministry. Joni's relationship with Doug Weiss wasn't just a personal matter. It was a decision that affected not only her family, but also the entire ministry she helped build. The public was watching, and the questions about transparency, integrity, and accountability weren't going away. As the story continued to unfold, it became clear that the implications of Joni and Doug's relationship would be felt far beyond their personal lives. They were now at the center of a larger conversation about the challenges facing Christian leaders, their ministries, and the trust of their followers. Rebecca Lamb, the youngest daughter of Joanie Lamb, had always been known for her outspoken and bold nature. When she felt something was wrong, especially within her family, she wasn't afraid to speak up. Her concerns about her mother's relationship with Dr. Doug Weiss were no exception. She had watched from the sidelines as her mother moved forward with a relationship that she felt was too fast and too soon. After Marcus Lamb's death, Joni's quick decision to marry Doug raised a lot of questions, and Rebecca, like many others, was vocal about her disapproval. She made it clear that she didn't agree with her mother's choices and wasn't afraid to confront her. However, in recent months, Rebecca's silence has been deafening. No more social media posts, no public statements, no interviews, just silence. This sudden change in her behavior left many people wondering what had happened. What had changed? Why was Rebecca, once so vocal about her concerns, suddenly so quiet? The abruptness of it all was jarring. For months, people had watched as she voiced her opinion on the situation, and now, all of a sudden, she was absent from the conversation. The silence was particularly strange, considering how much Rebecca had been speaking out just a year ago. She had been one of the most vocal critics of her mother's relationship with Doug. She had argued with Joni, confronted her about the speed of the relationship, and questioned the impact it was having on their family and their ministry. Rebecca's stance was clear. She believed her mother was rushing into something that wasn't healthy and wasn't in line with the values their family had always promoted. But now, with everything that had happened, Rebecca's silence raised more questions than answers. What had caused her to step back? What had changed in her relationship with her mother and the rest of the family? As it turns out, Rebecca's silence might not be entirely voluntary. There are reports that suggest she was pressured into silence through legal means. Jonathan Lamb, her brother, has indicated that Rebecca was forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement, NDA, by her mother, Joni. An NDA is a legal document that prevents someone from speaking publicly about certain matters, typically in exchange for money or a promise of protection. For Rebecca, this meant that she was legally bound to remain silent about the events unfolding in her family. This revelation adds a layer of complexity to the entire situation. Rebecca, who had been so vocal and so willing to challenge her mother, was now silenced by a legal document. The very person who had once fought to protect her family's values and integrity was now being forced to stay quiet.